Right, guys. Indeed, we're definitely happy to be having yet another weekly article review, and we are always looking forward to having these amazing conversations. So, definitely welcome to our weekly cybersecurity and article review in 30 minutes. In these reviews, we, as cybersecurity professionals, enjoy discussing and sharing our expert analysis and insights about various articles covering the current events related to cybersecurity that are affecting our businesses and organizations of all types and industries. And to add value to today's conversations, we have Jonathan Fisher and Paul Robinson. Guys, thanks for taking the time to join in this conversation.
Thank you for having.
Yeah, always happy to be here.
Awesome, definitely, guys. I always look forward to, being the company of like-minded persons, and that's one of the great things about this platform when professionals like ourselves are able to share ideas and to really add value to making us as better cybersecurity, practitioners. And now, to when we really look at it, let's face it that the fact is that cyber attacks, in whichever form, is not going away, and that's the reality, guys. Not going away anytime soon. Which simply means that we, as security practitioners, must ensure that we are doing all the necessary research to better understand what is it that influences IT security spending so that we can be in a better position to financially communicate this to the executives within our organizations or the powers that be to get their support of the various initiatives that we need to be implemented within our organizations that can definitely help in reducing the cyber risk exposure to the various attack surfaces that exist within our environment. And in today's article published by Help Net Security, I found this very interesting, and I definitely hope that you will definitely get some insights from this article itself. It's one that looks at factors influencing IT security spending. All right, guys. So as it relates to this, so Jonathan, can you, share your take on this article itself, and then we can actually start diving, breaking it apart as it relates to
Yeah,
those elements.
absolutely. One of the big things that it really starts talking about is the use of AI. AI is just blowing up. Everyone wants to use it. I know the last, my current organization, we're looking at how we can use AI within, the federal contracting space, because we have certain obligations that we have to meet to the federal government on how we use data and what we're using. Um, so we've had to go through and really uh, kind of parse out what is an acceptable use, how we would use it. I think we recently just done that, and now we have to go through and kind of do some security assessments on some of the tools. Um, so it's very interesting to see, how the senior leaders in our organization have decided that they want AI to be used. Obviously, it's a research center, so it's one that we are very interested in using some of these tools to be able to help the researchers start to have a starting point on their research. And in the article, I believe it says that, you know, 20, 22% say that they want to use it. And, that's just going to get even bigger as time goes on. Because right now, there's still a little bit of risk appetite out there. Some people aren't quite sure how to use it. They're interested in using it, but they want to make sure that everything's secure. Once kind of they get that the tool tested, used, find out kind of all those vulnerabilities that they want to steer away from, then absolutely everyone's going to want to start using it. My last organization I was with, we're looking at it, doing external audits. They wanted to look at how we can, speed up our reporting times. How can AI help with the reports and being able to, spend less time for us writing those reports and just, try to have, some generative AI speed that process up.
Yeah, right on point. Very important points as it relates to the article. Paul, what's your take on this article?
Yeah, not to make it a an AI discussion, but a couple of things that Jonathan mentioned that is true is that just like the internet, when the internet became mainstream in the mid to late 90s, the dollars are irrefutable as to the amount of money and time that you can save on using AI. So this isn't something where the we can yell at the clouds and scream at the clouds about how we hate AI and how we're going to buck the system and whatnot. It's just here. It's here to stay, and it's a good tool. I think fundamentally, security professionals, we cringe anytime there's something new and exciting that comes out from an IT perspective, but it's great. I mean, companies are being formatted, startups are starting just by leveraging AI. With that, the from a spend perspective of where we need to be careful of is, and Jonathan, I'm glad you mentioned this, is how do we manage our organization's risk as we implement AI, because that's a cost that could happen if you don't have the risk landscape mapped out and you're just using the hundreds of platforms for AI, just not haphazardly. You're really going to run into regulatory compliance struggle. GDPR came up recently this week, and there are all these data privacy acts that are popping up stateside of, is this an acceptable technology for you to put data in? And, it could cost you fines on the back end. So, yeah, not to, there's definitely some more pieces in the article, but really AI has become top of mind for not only technology people but for executives as well, and that's something that is going to have to be addressed and is going to influence budgets and spending for this foreseeable future.
Awesome points, guys. But one of the question is we're actually looking at, and that's one of the starting point of this article in terms of the one of the things that the executives actually point towards, and is that the use of AI is also one of those elements that will be driving and influencing IT security spend. What are those factors you might, when you think about those factors influencing, based on the article, what are those major factors that have been identified that are actually influencing IT spending within organizations? I would definitely like to hear some insights on those findings based on those items. I mean, possibly
Well,
Jonathan
yeah,
or Paul.
yeah. I mean, I think one of the biggest things that companies are worried about is just the state of the economy. All right. In this article, it talks about at first 38%. We're talking about how the recession is going to influence their spending, and I think now it says it's moving up to 48%. Or I'm sorry, the 48% is talking about the distributed workforce. So how you have your people. If you have people in different states, you got to understand what those laws are for the states. So that way you're paying them correctly, you're taxing them correctly, making sure that as a company you're abiding by all the legal terms that the state has imposed on companies that work in that or now have workers there. But I think the biggest is just the state of the economy. People are afraid to put in, with the fear of the recession. We kind of saw it at the end of last year. A lot of the companies, a lot of the big tech companies start laying off people. Guess what that did? That did a chain reaction throughout all the tech on how people wanted to spend money, and especially for those who are in the startup space. At that point, I was working for a startup. We were just within our 2 year point, and we were going through. We had a series funding secured, and then the investors backed out just because of kind of the state that the investors were afraid of. At the beginning, maybe now it might be different because we kind of have gone through like a little rolling recession, or not recession, but rolling factors over the last almost 8 months, since they first started, right? We haven't really hit that recession. We've been still kind of hanging in there. So I think the interest from investors is still there to do it, but definitely back then, there's a big shockwave that hit. It probably hasn't fully resided. I mean, there's still people who are probably interested in investing, where there's companies who are probably struggling with getting some funding, or even wanting to spend money, whether that's on the workforce growing it, just because the dollar is the bottom line for them. So they need to make sure that they're taking care of themselves, which sometimes it will impact the desire to want to spend on new tools or invest in the security controls that could help them from getting an attack. We talked about last week that if they haven't been hit yet, there's that kind of compliance zone, and so with the recession fears and the state of the economy, some people might think that they can take a little bit more risk because nothing's happened to them yet.
Sure, right, exactly. One of the questions that actually comes to mind when I actually read this article is, I mean, is this saying that if we as security practitioners within our organizations know what these factors are in terms of understanding these factors, are we in a better position to really make the necessary business case for the required support to implement the necessary security initiatives within these organizations? Paul, what's your take?
Yeah, I'm going to say this, and I really want people to zone in and listen into what I'm going to say here, because I think it's very important. This is all risk-based activities that are tied to cybersecurity. And let me unpack that for a little bit. If I lived in Southern California and my house was on the San Andreas Fault, which, for those who don't know, that's a major fault line for a massive earthquake if that were to happen. Could I, and it's an inevitable thing that's going to happen, kind of like I view cyber attacks. So could I spend hundreds of millions of dollars fortifying my house, fortifying my property, whatever, to protect myself from that? Yes. But the fact of the matter is that the earthquake is still going to happen at some point. I have to manage my risk inside of that. And I don't have infinite dollars to protect my house or my family against that. So how do I manage my risk? And so when we're making the business decisions of what it is that we need to do, I think our industry has not done such a great job of, we productize too many things. We're like, buy this, plug this in, it goes there, or do this service and you'll be okay. But organizations really take to step back and say, okay, here's the money that we have, here's the time that we have. What can we do inside of these budgets and these time frames to do whatever we can? And whatever we can't do, at least we know the risk. Let's manage the risk. So if you have a firewall that is older and you'd like to get a more next generation firewall inside of your environment, but can't afford it for the next 2 years, okay, how do we make lemonade out of lemons here and do the best job that we can to make sure that it works, but then also understanding the risk of this firewall might not catch threats and vulnerabilities that a next generation firewall happens, that happens to happen. And so we want the business to understand, and this is a top-down kind of approach. It's not siloed. You mentioned siloed. It's not a technology thing. It's an executive thing. It's a board level thing. It's an HR thing. It's a sales and marketing thing to say, okay, we know the risk. So God forbid something were to happen, at least we're not surprised. I say that a lot. Surprises are not good, especially when it comes to a cyber attack or an incident that takes place. That's kind of free of charge. It's a little bit of time, but it's building risk inside of your cybersecurity practice that will help control the dollars and make sure every last dime that you spend is spent in the right way to mitigate a risk that could be catastrophic to a business.
Okay, that's also a very, valid point. And I found this article very, eye opening in terms of, based on what is being coming from the research, is that we have the enterprise or those external risks that affects the entire organization, as well as those operational risks. And this, of course, help us, I would say, once we understand those external, factors that are actually affecting or influencing the IT security spending, then we are better able to tailor, whatever request that we have from the executives. I somewhat maybe want to maybe play the devil's advocate in this perspective, in that if we know this information, can't we use this to, I mean, maybe force the hands of the powers that be to get the necessary supports that we want, which goes back to the point that even though we are employed depending on our role in organizations, it's not just about, what your current role is at the desk. But when you actually take that time to do the necessary research, look at what is actually happening within the market in terms of the research. This article is so interesting in itself when you talk about all of the factors influencing IT security spending. We're talking about based on the research that is, right? So based on the research, they're saying that inflation, the distributed workforce, the supply chain issues, looming recession, and also expected change in company headcount. These are the findings that they find that are actually influencing the budgets, the monies that are allocated towards IT security spending in organizations. I think you also mentioned a point, Paul, about the fact that uh, I'm trying to find where it is. Um, yeah, mention of a point that there's a bit of, dichotomy in that, in the data, said reader. Can you share some insights on that point?
Yeah, I found some of the statistics alarming and concerning from the perspective of I don't, let me hold off because it could come across wrong. But I'll just make my statement. The fact that malware was at 39% of the concern. I think ransomware was around 36%, and then phishing was at 26%. Phishing was number three on the top three. I thought that was a little bit concerning because what is a conduit for malware and ransomware to get in? It's through phishing. Like it's not just, ransomware and malware just drop out of the sky. There has to be a conduit to get these malicious code, malicious software inside of an organization to take it down. It's phishing. So when I saw that, I was a little concerned because it's like, do we as an industry, because you hear malware, you hear ransomware, it's sensationalized whenever something comes out. It's like ABC company was ransomware, but there's a way to get into the building, which is phishing. That's to me should be number one because you want to fortify your internal network. You want to train people how to identify a phishing email and things of that nature. So yeah, I was a little concerned when I saw that statistic. Jonathan, I don't know if you saw that, if you agree or disagree, but I'm interested.
Oh yeah, I definitely agree with that. That was pretty staggering to see that. Looking at it, it says phishing attack is on number 6 on that list. So, in between malware, ransomware, there's a few other things that have executives concerned as far as the biggest threats before you get to phishing. The funny thing is that the next little paragraph under that is that they identified that the most vulnerable um, entry point is through email. That's what phishing is through the email. So it's kind of interesting how it's kind of lopsided on that. That you know, executives know that the email is the number one attack vector, but yet phishing is ranked so low. Now, granted, there are different ways for ransomware and malware to get put on a computer on the network besides phishing attacks. But that's if they've already had a door open from previous things. As long as companies are doing their due diligence on at least implementing those security controls, a lot of times that's not too much of an issue. Now, I'm not saying every time, right? I'm going to be like with Paul and kind of, not, you know, stake a flag on that. But, for the most part, malware and ransomware is, brought through those phishing attacks. Um, so yeah, that was a huge, interesting point. That was kind of alarming. Just the lopsidedness of what they feel was the biggest threat, but also what the biggest attack vector was. That was just alarming.
Yeah, that very great points there. But one of the very interesting thing about this article though is the fact that the article says factors influencing IT security. And what I understand or what I'm seeing from the article is that the information that has been garnered is actually coming from executives. They are the ones which simply speaks to the fact that the mindset of our executives, the board members, I mean, senior management is somewhat changing. There is some amount of movement from that old way of doing things. I mean, there's also a change within the various boards in terms of having persons who actually have a background or an understanding of cybersecurity and cybersecurity risks that can actually affect an organization's operations. So this is one of the things that was really, striking coming from this article is the fact that when you look at the pressing cybersecurity threats from the article, and you guys have actually mentioned some of these, it says that when asked which cybersecurity threats were most pressing, the executives, these are the executives that have actually identified these issues. So I'm saying to myself, executives, what type of executives are we talking about? Are these regular executives that we are accustomed, traditional executives? Are these persons that are now having a better grasp? What's your take on the fact that are you now seeing a better acceptance, or is there now a shift in the way organizations are now being structured from a governance perspective? I mean, Paul, Jonathan, hey, Paul.
Yeah, I don't think they have I don't think they have a choice anymore. I don't think companies have a choice anymore to just look at it as a call center and a time and money sink. I think now you're starting to see a better discussion around the money that is involved in a cyber attack. And again, executive boards, CEOs, their jobs are to grow the business, generate revenue, and protect the health of the company. And now you're starting to see a shift to say, hey, cybersecurity is part of that. It could close our doors down if we don't pay mind to it. And the statistics kind of show that yes, they are getting involved, but there's still a ton of education that needs to take place. We have to educate our executives and boards and CEOs on what these things do from a practical message. They hear malware and ransomware because it's in a Forbes article, a Wall Street Journal article, and things that they're reading. But we got to get better at simplifying it to say, okay, this is how it gets in. And then as they start to learn that, it's like, oh, okay, I could wrap my logical brain around that.
Yeah, that's also very critical. I know one of the final point coming out of this article And it says that another theme that was prevalent throughout the study was the pressing need for IT and security talent. I mean, 44% of all the respondents said that hiring qualified IT workers would be more of an imperative in 2023 than in previous years. And also, 38% said specifically that they expect hiring qualified security experts would be a challenge in 2023. And also, we have been talking about a talent gap in IT and security for some time now, and it's starting to have a more significant impact on companies as they rely on technology to operate and secure their business. Added reader. So, what's your final, points, thoughts on that point in terms of that being a pressing, I mean, factor influencing, IT security?
Yeah, I'm gonna try not to get on a huge soapbox here, because I know we're kind of running out of time. But to me, what do they consider a qualified IT worker, right? I love the fact that the cybersecurity executives or just executives are changing their mind towards malware and understanding, the need for these tools about the threats that there's. Now let's get them and the hiring manager under them to understand what is a qualified IT person, because build training programs, bring in people who have a desire to get into it. I mean, we always hear that gap of, I don't even know where it's at, like over 1 million or 2 million. I can't remember what the number is anymore. Guess what? There's so many people out there. They don't need to have years of experience. If you have a good training program, you're going to be able to bring someone in that has that desire to learn, and they're going to be able to grow very fast if you support them in their training and their learning, through either helping them go through some of these certifications and getting the knowledge. If you have training programs set up so that way, maybe your more experienced employees can help them understand, right? You don't expect someone to come into a business, even if they have experience, to come in and day one be able to take off running. They have to learn the business model. They have to learn how things are doing. It's probably a different technology stack that's being used. So there's still always going to be some type of learning gap that even, experienced security people are doing. You can bring in people, not always saying at a lower cost for entry level, but, you can help build people up. I've only been in this industry for a little over 18 months, right? And that's because someone took a chance on me, let me grow and learn, right? There's a lot of talent that's out there that can be utilized and brought in. So let's get rid of this trying to find the magical unicorn. Let's bring in people who have that desire and train them.
Exactly, me right on point, and for sure, this could actually, go in a whole different, level of conversation, and that is one of my key things that I always use that metric to measure scaffolding. We're talking about risk, creating the parameters, access control, creating that, what you would say, that perimeter fence around persons, as you say, taking a chance. It does not matter what your role is, what your experience is. Once you're placed in a new environment, I cannot say to you, go have fun. Even if someone is there years ahead of you who might not be as qualified as you are on paper, that individual is more knowledgeable of that internal system than you, even if you are at the highest rank of your profession. Which simply means that you would have to get inside that organization. You would have to be taught, trained according to that environment. So that goes back to, once you're trainable, once you have the right, attitudes, drive, then you can be trained to, do any particular job function. What's your last point, Paul?
It's really hard to follow up what Jonathan said because it was spot on. I mean, I would be doing a disservice to kind of tag on to that. Agree 100%. Um, we got to get more creative in how we hire. We got to get smarter in how we hire. The talent is out there. It is out there, and there are people hungry to break into the industry that could bring talents and gifts and skills. that we're not even thinking about in the industry. So, thankfully, someone took a chance on Jonathan, and now he's bringing tremendous value to the community. Someone took a chance on me. It's really being creative, like our adversaries are creative. Um, nobody wakes up in the morning and says, "Hey, I want to be a cyber criminal." They have to learn, they have to understand the business, and someone has to take a chance on them. We need to mirror the tactics of our adversaries to compete in a very dangerous battle. And when we start doing that, you're going to see the needle moving in a better way. But Jonathan's points were spot on. Excellent.
Guys, that's a wrap on our weekly CyberJA, weekly cybersecurity and GRC article review. And we're always looking forward to having these conversations. So, guys, have a wonderful rest of the day.